The grandfather clock's steady rhythm echoed through the empty halls of the Wellington house, its ancient brass pendulum marking time like a metronome. Thomas Wellington stood at his kitchen window, watching November snow dust the Maine coastline. His reflection in the glass showed a man weathered beyond his 62 years. Silver hair cropped military short, deep lines etched around eyes that had seen the moons of Jupiter up close. The kitchen counter behind him held the modest makings of a Thanksgiving dinner for one: a pre-cooked turkey breast, instant mashed potatoes, and canned cranberry sauce. The same meal he'd prepared for the past 5 years. Ever since the Europa mission ended in tragedy, he'd given his housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, the week off despite her protests. Some anniversaries needed to be faced alone. Thomas's fingers traced the worn edges of the mission patch on his old flight jacket, the words Europa Mission surrounding the image of Jupiter's ice-covered moon. The crew's names were embroidered below: Wellington, Rodriguez, Patel, Winters, Cattry. Only his remained unscored by the black line of death. "Enough," he muttered, turning from the window. The house creaked around him. 3 centuries of Wellington history settled into its bones. His great-grandfather had built it after making his fortune in shipbuilding, and every generation since had added their own touches. Thomas's contribution was the observatory dome on the east wing, though he hadn't used it since his return to Earth. He was reaching for the turkey when a familiar tone sounded from his comm unit. The NASA logo flashed on the screen, unusual for a holiday. Thomas hesitated, then accepted the call. Director Harrison's face appeared, looking troubled. "Tom, sorry to disturb you on Thanksgiving. James, didn't expect to hear from you today." Thomas kept his voice neutral. Harrison had been the one to sign off on the Europa mission, and their relationship had been complicated ever since. "We're picking up something unusual at the Deep Space Array. Started about an hour ago. The pattern. Well, it reminds me of the signals we got from Europa before." Thomas's hand clenched involuntarily. "I'm retired, James. Call your active duty people. You're still the leading expert on non-terrestrial signal analysis, and you're the only one who was there, who saw my crew die." Thomas cut in sharply. Saw the ice crack beneath Rodriguez while she was taking samples. Watched Patel and Winters get pulled under while trying to save her. Listened to Chatry's last words as her suit pressure failed. Harrison's face fell. "Tom, I know what day it is. I know what this means to you. But this signal, it's not coming from Europa. It's approaching Earth." Thomas felt the old familiar surge of adrenaline, the astronaut in him responding to the call despite 5 years of carefully cultivated retirement. He glanced at his meager Thanksgiving preparations, then at the observatory dome visible through the window. "Send me the data," he said finally. The files arrived seconds later. Thomas walked to his study, powered up the old equipment. The signal pattern scrolled across his screen, a complex series of mathematical sequences that made his breath catch. This was no random space noise or astronomical phenomenon. This was intentional communication. As he began his analysis, the snow started falling harder outside. The grandfather clock struck 3, its chimes echoing through the house. Thomas barely noticed, his mind already racing through possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider in years. The numbers spoke of intelligence, of purpose, of... He froze, double-checking his calculations. The signal wasn't just approaching Earth, it was decelerating. And if his math was correct, its trajectory would bring it down less than 10 miles from his house. Thomas stood, years of training taking over. He needed to contact Harrison, to alert local authorities, to prepare for... What? First contact. An invasion. A coincidence too precise to be chance. The lights flickered as wind howled outside. Thomas Wellington looked around his empty house, at the solitary Thanksgiving meal abandoned in the kitchen, at the mission patch that had haunted him for 5 years. For the first time since Europa, he felt truly alive again. He grabbed his coat and keys. Whatever was coming, it would find humanity's welcome committee consisted of one retired astronaut with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. As he stepped out into the storm, Thomas whispered the words he'd said before every mission. The snow whipped across Thomas's face as he made his way to the observatory dome. His old equipment hummed to life, scanners and radar systems awakening from their long dormancy. The signal was growing stronger, its mathematical precision unmistakable against the background noise of space. Through the observatory's main telescope, he caught his first glimpse, a bright point of light moving with deliberate purpose through the storm clouds. Too controlled to be a meteor, too small for a conventional spacecraft. The object's heat signature was unlike anything he'd ever seen, suggesting a propulsion system far beyond current human technology. His secure line to NASA crackled. "Wellington, are you tracking this?" Harrison's voice was tense. "Affirmative. It's conducting a controlled descent, James. Whatever it is, it's intelligent." Thomas adjusted his instruments, trying to get a clearer reading, and it's heading straight for the Wellington Point shoreline. Military units are en route, ETA 40 minutes in this weather. Try to maintain distance and... Negative. Thomas cut in, already pulling on his heavy winter gear. "They're landing in the middle of a blizzard. If they need help, we can't wait 40 minutes. Tom, don't be a hero. Not again. We don't know their intentions." Thomas checked the emergency kit he'd never quite brought himself to dismantle. They chose to land near the only person within 100 miles who's had actual extraterrestrial contact experience. "That's not coincidence, James." He ended the call over Harrison's protests and headed out into the storm. The vehicle was visible now, a sleek craft about the size of a small bus, its hull shimmering with an iridescent material that seemed to absorb the snowflakes. It was conducting a spiral descent pattern that Thomas recognized, a standard emergency landing procedure, universal across any civilization that had mastered flight. The craft touched down on the rocky shoreline below his property, steam rising where its hull met the snow. Thomas approached cautiously, medical kit in one hand, universal translator tablet in the other. As he drew closer, he could see damage along one side of the vessel, impact marks and scoring that looked eerily similar to the ice damage that had damaged his own craft on Europa. A hatch whispered open, releasing a brief pulse of atmospherics that crystallized in the cold air. 3 figures emerge, their movements suggesting injury or exhaustion. The first was tall and slender, with silvery skin that rippled like liquid metal. The second was shorter, built more solidly, with what appeared to be crystalline growths along its arms. The third. Thomas stopped short. The third figure was human. "Thank God," the woman called out, her voice hoarse. She was middle-aged, wearing what looked like a modified version of a standard spacesuit. "I'm Dr. Isabella Reyes, xenobiologist. These are Zor Ith and Kyle Vin of the Centauri Science Academy. We need help." Thomas rushed forward as Dr. Reyes stumbled. The alien called Zor Ith reached out with a silvery appendage to steady her. Up close, Thomas could see that both aliens were injured, their unusual physiologies showing signs of trauma. "Thomas Wellington." He introduced himself, already assessing their conditions. "My house is just up the hill. Can you make it?" "Wellington." Dr. Rice's eyes widened. "The Europa mission commander." Then the navigation calculations were correct. "We need your help, Commander. What we found in the Centauri system, it's connected to what happened on Europa." The wind howled around them as Thomas processed her words. The alien called Kyle Vin made a series of crystalline sounds that the translator rendered as, "The ice mines are spreading." Europa was only the beginning. Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. He led them up the path to his house, memories of Europa flooding back, the strange readings from beneath the ice, the way the surface had seemed to move with purpose, the last transmissions from his crew describing something impossible. Inside, the grandfather clock struck 4 as Thomas helped his unexpected guests into the warm kitchen. The half-prepared Thanksgiving meal sat forgotten on the counter as he broke out his medical supplies. Dr. Rice accepted a thermal blanket while the aliens studied their surroundings with obvious fascination. "Your timing is interesting," Thomas said as he treated a nasty burn on Dr. Rice's arm. "Thanksgiving isn't usually when we expect first contact." "Not first contact," Zor-Eth's translator chimed. "Continuation of contact. Your crew on Europa. They did not die in vain, Commander Wellington. They discovered something ancient and dangerous, something that has followed us across the stars." Dr. Rice nodded grimly. "We came to warn Earth, but we were attacked at the edge of your solar system. The same type of attack that damaged your mission on Europa. We had just enough power to track down the one human who might understand, the commander who got away." Thomas looked at his alien guests, at the determined xenobiologist, at the mission patch he'd worn for 5 years of guilt and questions. Outside, the storm intensified, but for the first time since Europa, the house didn't feel empty. "Start from the beginning," he said, pulling up a chair. "Tell me everything." Zor-Eth's liquid metal skin rippled with what the translator identified as grave concern. "Perhaps first, Commander, you could explain this ritual of Thanksgiving. We have studied Earth's transmissions, but this gathering for expressing gratitude. It seems significant that we have arrived during such a time." Thomas glanced at his meager holiday preparations, then at the extraordinary gathering in his kitchen. "You know what? It is significant, and we're going to need more food." As he began to properly prepare for an expanded Thanksgiving dinner, Thomas realized that for the first time in 5 years, he had something to be truly thankful for: answers, purpose, and most importantly, an end to the silence. In the warmth of the Wellington House kitchen, an unprecedented Thanksgiving dinner preparation was underway. Thomas rummaged through his pantry, grateful that Mrs. Patterson always insisted on keeping it well stocked. The aliens watched with curious intensity as he and Dr. Rice worked to expand the modest meal into something that could accommodate their unusual gathering. "Your species prepares sustenance individually?" Kyle Vin asked, crystal formations catching the kitchen light. "In our colonies, nutrient synthesis is a communal process." Thomas pulled out additional vegetables and a bag of potatoes. "Cooking can be communal too. In fact, that's what Thanksgiving is usually about. People coming together to prepare and share food." He paused, remembering countless holidays with his crew during training. "Would you like to help?" The aliens' enthusiasm for learning Earth customs proved both heartwarming and challenging. Zor-Eth's liquid metal appendages were remarkably dexterous for chopping vegetables, though they had to be careful not to accidentally absorb the knife. Kyle Vin's crystalline structure generated enough heat to cook surfaces they touched, which proved useful once they learned to control the temperature. As they worked, Dr. Rice began explaining what they'd discovered in the Centauri system. "We found ruins," she said, peeling potatoes alongside Thomas. "Ancient structures buried in ice, just like on Europa. But these had been studied by the Centaurians for generations. They held warnings. The ice mines are patient," Zor-Eth's translator hummed. "They seed themselves across galaxies, waiting in frozen worlds until spacefaring civilizations emerge. Your Europa mission wasn't the first contact. It was their first attempt at awakening in your system." Thomas's hand stilled on the turkey he was preparing. "My crew, what really happened to them?" "They were perceived as a threat." Kyle Vin's crystals chimed softly. "The ice mines protect their dormant phases aggressively. Your presence, your sampling activities, triggered a defense mechanism. But your crew's sacrifice revealed their existence to us. Without that, we wouldn't have recognized the pattern when we found it in our system." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of cooking and the storm outside. Thomas absorbed this information, years of guilt and questions finally finding context. His crew hadn't died because of his decisions. They died uncovering a threat to all intelligent life. Dr. Rice touched his arm gently. "Commander, we need your help. The Centaurian Science Academy has been tracking ice mine activity across multiple systems. We believe they're entering an active phase, possibly triggered by increasing interstellar travel. Earth needs to be warned and prepared. Your planet has an advantage, Zor-Ith added. You've already encountered them once, and you have thermal energy resources that could be vital for defense. Our scientists believe the ice mines cannot survive prolonged exposure to heat. As if to emphasize the point, Kyle Vin used their crystalline heat properties to perfectly brown a tray of rolls. The incongruous normalcy of the moment, discussing cosmic threats while preparing dinner, struck Thomas as surprisingly appropriate. The grandfather clock struck 6 as they finally settled around the dining room table. The spread before them was unlike any Thanksgiving dinner in history. Traditional turkey and potatoes alongside specially prepared nutrient solutions for their alien guests, all arranged on Thomas's grandmother's best china. Before we eat, Thomas said, feeling the weight of tradition and history, it's customary to share what we're thankful for. He looked at each of his guests in turn. I'm thankful for answers, and for the chance to make my crew's sacrifice mean something. Dr. Rice smiled. I'm thankful for successful first contact, and for finding allies in this fight. Zor-Ith's surface rippled in what the translator indicated was their culture's expression of gratitude. We are thankful for the warmth of welcome, both thermal and emotional. Your species' capacity for adaptation and acceptance is remarkable. Kyle Vin's crystals chimed melodiously. We are thankful for the opportunity to share knowledge and resources. Together, perhaps we can prevent other worlds from experiencing what happened on Europa. As they began to eat, the conversation flowed naturally between tactical discussions and cultural exchange. The aliens were fascinated by Earth customs, asking countless questions about Thanksgiving's history and meaning. In turn, they shared stories of their own celebration rituals, translated through a mixture of technology and enthusiastic gesturing. Thomas found himself explaining human concepts he'd never really thought about before: why we carve turkeys, the significance of passing dishes around the table, why some foods were considered comfort foods. Each explanation led to deeper discussions about human nature and community. Your species finds strength in shared experiences, Zor-Ith observed, absorbing their nutrient solution through their permeable surface. Even in potential crisis, you maintain these rituals of connection. Especially in crisis, Thomas corrected. That's when we need them most. As the evening progressed, the storm outside seemed to fade in importance. The gathering had taken on a significance beyond its unusual circumstances. They were no longer just allies against a common threat. They were participants in one of humanity's oldest traditions, finding family among strangers, sharing food and stories, creating connections that transcended differences. Dr. Rice was explaining the concept of dessert to their fascinated guests when Thomas's secure line chimed again. Harrison's face appeared on the screen, backed by what looked like a military command center. Tom, we've got units approaching your position. I need a situation report. He stopped, taking in the scene behind Thomas. Are you having Thanksgiving dinner with them? Thomas looked back at his table, at the human scientist teaching aliens how to eat pumpkin pie, at the legacy china holding food from 2 different star systems, at the mission patch he finally laid to rest beside a fresh dinner roll. The storm's truth. As military vehicles approached through the blizzard, Thomas made a decision that would change Earth's future. Instead of waiting for their arrival, he activated his home's security protocols, a remnant from his NASA days that even Harrison didn't know about. Observatory defense systems engaged, the house AI announced. A subtle shimmer appeared around the property's perimeter, a prototype force field developed for the Europa mission, but never implemented. It wouldn't stop the military forever, but it would buy them time. Commander, Dr. Rice looked concerned. If they take you into custody, we lose valuable time, Thomas explained. The ice mines are active now. We need to handle this our way first. He turned to his alien guests. Tell me everything you know about their weaknesses. Zor-Ith's liquid metal form rippled with urgency. They communicate through crystalline structures within ice formations. Their consciousness is distributed. Destroy one node, and the others adapt. But they depend on maintaining specific thermal conditions, which is why they attacked when we drilled into Europa's ice. Thomas realized. We weren't just taking samples, we were threatening their environment. Kelvin's crystals pulsed with confirmation. Our scientists discovered that coordinated heat application can disrupt their neural networks. But the scale required. That's why you came to Earth, Thomas said, understanding dawning. We're the only civilization in this sector with extensive experience in thermal energy management. Dr. Rice pulled up data on her tablet. The Centaurians have been tracking ice mine activity across multiple systems. They're not just awakening. They're coordinating. Earth's thermal technology combined with Centaurian crystal tech could be the key to stopping them. Outside, military spotlights pierced the storm. Harrison's voice came through the comm. Tom, you're forcing my hand here. No, James. For once, I'm taking control of the situation. Thomas faced his guests. We need to show them, not just tell them. Show them what's really at stake. In his study, Thomas retrieved a sealed case he hadn't opened since returning from Europa. Inside was a sample, one he'd never reported, one he'd kept because something about it had never made sense until now. Under a portable microscope, the ice crystal structure matched exactly what Zor-Ith and Kelvin had described. Commander, Dr. Rice breathed, you've had proof this whole time. I had a sample. Now we have context. He looked at his alien guests. Can you communicate with it? Show them what we're facing. What happened next would be debated in classified sessions for years to come. Kelvin's crystalline structure resonated at a specific frequency while Zor-Ith's liquid metal form created a containment field. The ice sample responded, growing into complex patterns that projected images across the study walls. Star maps, invasion patterns, neural networks spanning galaxies. When the military finally breached the perimeter, they found something no one had expected. Proof of an interstellar threat, evidence of advanced alien allies, and a clear path forward that required cooperation instead of confrontation. The grandfather clock struck midnight as Thomas Wellington, former Europa mission commander, began briefing Earth's military and scientific leadership on humanity's next great challenge. With 2 alien scientists and a xenobiologist standing proudly at his side. 1 year later, Thomas stood in his kitchen, watching snow fall outside his window. But this time, he wasn't alone. His home had become the unofficial meeting point for the Earth Centauri Defense Initiative, and today was special, the first anniversary of that fateful Thanksgiving. Dr. Rice was directing a team of human and alien scientists in the converted observatory, where they monitored ice mine activity across the solar system. The thermal defense network they'd developed had already prevented 3 attempted awakening events. Zor-Ith and Kelvin had become permanent ambassadors to Earth, their unique abilities proving crucial in developing new technologies. More importantly, they'd become family. Their fascination with human customs had led to a beautiful blending of cultures. The dining room table was set for 30. Scientists, military personnel, and alien visitors all gathering for what had become a new tradition. Each brought dishes from their own worlds, creating a feast that represented the best of multiple civilizations working together. Harrison arrived early, looking more relaxed than Thomas had seen him in years. Hard to believe it's been a year, he said, watching Kelvin teach a young scientist how to properly calibrate a crystal resonance device. Harder to believe we kept it secret for so long, Thomas replied. The world still didn't know about the ice mines, but they would soon. Humanity was stronger now, ready for the truth. Dr. Rice joined them, her tablet showing green status indicators across the system. The thermal network is holding. No signs of activity near any of the ice moons. As everyone gathered around the table, Thomas looked at his transformed home, at the family he'd found in the most unexpected places. The mission patch from Europa now hung in a place of honor, alongside symbols from a dozen other worlds, no longer a reminder of loss, but a testament to discovery. Before we begin, Thomas said, standing at the head of the table, I'd like to propose a new tradition. In the past year, we've learned that gratitude isn't unique to humanity. It's a bridge between civilizations. So let's go around and share, each in our own way, what this alliance means to us. As voices human and alien join together, sharing stories and hopes for the future, Thomas finally understood what his crew had really discovered on Europa. Not just a threat, but an opportunity, a chance for different species to come together, to face challenges as one. The grandfather clock chimed, but its sound was lost in the warm conversation and laughter that filled the house. Outside, the snow continued to fall on a world forever changed by one remarkable Thanksgiving dinner. And somewhere in the depths of space, the ice mines found themselves facing something they had never encountered in all their eons of existence. Multiple civilizations standing together, bound not by fear, but by friendship, family, and the simple act of sharing a meal. Thomas Wellington smiled, passing a dish of synthesized Centaurian delicacy to Harrison, while Zoreth attempted to carve a turkey with their liquid metal appendages. This, he thought, was what Thanksgiving was truly about, not just giving thanks for what we have, but for what we can become together. End of story.